Welcome to Confessions of a Stenographer, where we're discussing all things steno and the state of our profession, probably a little bit in America and also on this side of the pond. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your co-host, Leah Willesdorf, and I'll be confessing all the way from the UK. So let's get into it. Originally, I was meant to be doing my confessions from Africa, where I've just got back from yesterday, but the internet wasn't so great. So we decided, Shanice and I, that we would do it when I got back here. But I'm honored to be doing this podcast because I've seen and listened to many of the others that have been done. And it's just wonderful to be in such great company of all those who have gone before me, shall we say. So I remember hearing about them. Shanice presented at the Empowerment Conference in Washington last year. She was the keynote speaker, and excellently done, I must say. And that's when she gave us a little sneak, not preview, but a little insight into the fact that this podcast was happening. So I'm even more excited because I knew about it then. So yes, so let's get into it. So who is Leah Willesdorf? Well, I'm originally from Australia, Brisbane, Australia, and I now live in London in the UK. I've been a stenographer since I started training in 1990. So that kind of shows my age a little bit. Yes, so in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, we had the one, and actually there might have been two, but there was one court reporting school in Brisbane. And so I went in secondary school, I was quite good at Pitman shorthand and English. When I was in secondary school in Australia, so this was probably, let's talk about maybe circa 1988, 87, 88. We had a show which I think many of the listeners in the States will know of, this television show called LA Law. And so we had that on television once a week in Australia. And I used to say to my mum, I would ask my mum, what is the bored-looking woman doing who's sitting in front of the judge, and she's tapping away on a funny little machine, and the paper is spewing out, and they're looking at her and saying, don't take that down, strike that. Anyway, my mum didn't know, so she said to ask my secretarial studies teacher. So I asked her. She was the teacher who was teaching us Pitman and typing. So I asked her, and she said that she had a student a couple of years previously who actually went on to do the course at the court reporting school in Brisbane. And her name, I remember her name was Selena. So she organised to get Selena to come in to speak to us one day, and she brought her machine in. And it was just so I was like 16, I think, maybe. So I was looking at this machine and I thought, yeah, that's really quite strange. Obviously we hadn't seen anything like it. And then we got to choose a choice for work experience in year 11. So that's 1988. So off I went. I ticked the box for shadowing a court reporter, and off I went to the Brisbane, what was called the State Reporting Bureau. And so I shadowed a stenographer. Back then, it was obviously still the paper notes and everything at the back. So the reporter would actually come out of court, dictate her paper notes to a typist. I'm not sure how that was done back then in the US, but it was probably quite similar. So it was after that week of shadowing a court reporter and sitting in the courtroom and watching things and then what she would do afterwards, that's when I knew that that's what I was going to do. That's what I was going to be when I grow up. So I continued through school knowing that I had to get certain grades to get into the court reporting school, and I did. So off I went to court reporting school, and that was what's the word? I'm trying to think of a word. let's just say on the first day we had 90 students, 90 students. So it was a 2-year course. On the last day of the second year, we had 10 out of that 90 left. So what happened on the first day, everybody had to stand up and say why they wanted to be a court reporter. And a lot of people were standing up and saying, oh, I want to do it for the money. I've seen the money. I have heard about the money this, the money that, blah, blah, blah. Me, I didn't know anything about the earnings or the potential earnings of the profession. So when it got to my turn, I stood up and I said, I've wanted to be a court reporter since I was 15. And then I gave the LA law story very quickly. I gave that story. And the whole room kind of groaned as if to say, oh, get her. Who's she? Everyone's here for the money. She's doing it because she watched it on some TV show. So I kind of showed them because like I say, at the end of the second year, there was only 10 of us left. And there's probably, out of that 10 in that year, I would say there's probably 6 of us still working, maybe 5. But yeah, so the 2-year course that we did, we had each semester was obviously the machine and the reporting aspect of it. But we also did, one semester had written English, one semester had spoken English, another semester had law, another semester had economics. And then we did 2 subjects, which to this day, I'm not sure what I learned, but one was management and organization was another subject. Yeah, like I say, I'm an organized person, but I don't know what that subject taught me. Anyway, so we come out of, we graduated with 200 words a minute, I think we had to graduate with when we left. And the year that I finished, which was 1991, the State Reporting Bureau in Brisbane was no longer hiring people. And the whole of Australia basically knew that Brisbane had this court reporting school. So that's where they would tend to recruit people from throughout the country. And whoever, in my particular year, and I'm gathering for the other years as well, whoever got the top mark, whoever sort of who finished the year with the highest grades, they were given an apprenticeship type of thing to go to Parliament in Canberra, which is in the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, in Canberra, to go to Parliament. And I think her name was Leah as well, and I think she stayed there for quite a while, I believe. So yes, the State Reporting Bureau wasn't hiring, so we had to look for other avenues, but we didn't have to look far because, like I say, the rest of the country knew that graduates were coming out of that course each year. So they would, the one that I had, South Australia, the Adelaide courts, they actually came up in my year. They came to Brisbane and they interviewed the 10 of us. Well, actually not the 10 of us, those who who would be prepared, let's say, to move to down south, down to Adelaide. If you were prepared to do that, then you were able to sit the exam. And then if you passed the exam, you had an interview. And I must say, to this day, that's probably the only real interview I've ever had for my jobs that I've had throughout the world. But, oh, maybe one other. Yeah, I think I must have at least done one when I got to England. So we did that, and out of the 10 students, the 10 of us who graduated, 6 of us, I think I'm right in saying, 6 of us went down to South Australia. So we started our career in the Magistrates Court, which is the lowest court of the land, basically. And the reason we started there was because you would work your way up to the higher courts so that when you are actually sitting there and taking down the proceedings, you actually were aware of how a case went through the system and ended up in, say, the Supreme Court, for example. So, yeah, we started in the Magistrates Court, and the Magistrates Court in Australia is a little different to here in England, even though the Australian system is based on the British system of law, the Westminster system. Our magistrates in Australia are what's called stipendiary magistrates. So they've all got a legal background, and most of the magistrates are working their way up to, I was going to say judgehood, but I guess it's a judgeship, maybe. I don't know, certainly not judgehood. That's the wrong word. So yes, a lot of the magistrates would eventually work their way up through the system into the higher courts. Not always. Some of them would stay in the magistrates court because that's just what they prefer, especially if you got to the chief magistrate. So what we would do in court then, in the magistrates court, we would all be kind of like a clerk or a clerk, as well as the stenographer. So if you're on a trial, if your magistrate was presiding over the trial, you would actually read the charge out to the defendant and take the plea. Then the evidence gets called, and that's when you'd have more than one person on a court. Now, in the magistrates court, it wasn't always a given that you would produce a transcript the same day. Sometimes you would be able to do what's called delayed turnaround for it. But if you were doing, say, what's called a committal, where they were taking evidence to see if the case was going to be committed to a higher court, then you would tend to have 2 to 3 girls, and sorry, generally they were women, 2 to 3 stenographers on a court, and you would go in and you would do 20 minutes. You would then come out, say there were 3 people. So I would do 10 o'clock to 10:20. Shanice would then come in and tap the table at an appropriate time, say between a question and an answer. She would take over. I go out and start transcribing my 20 minutes. Shanice would do from 10:20 to 10:40. The third person comes in at 10:40. Then by the time I'm due to go back in at 11, my turn, as we called it, was due to be, should have been completed and sitting there ready to go out. So that worked quite efficiently. And that's also how they would do it in the higher court as well. And you would have 20-minute turns. Sometimes you would have 30-minute turns, but that was a bit of a rarity, I think. And after 4 o'clock or 4:15, 4 o'clock, I think, the turns would go down by 5 minutes because you didn't want someone at the end of the day to have like a big chunk of however many pages 20 minutes was. So that was Adelaide. And in Adelaide, we had to do, in the magistrates court, we had to do 4 one-week circuit court. So did that make sense? 4 lots of 1 week of traveling around the state to one destination. So that was a good way to get to see the state and things that you wouldn't really see, especially when you're not from there, where I was from up north, I suppose, to get to see the state of South Australia. It's a beautiful state. It was a beautiful country. But yeah, that was pretty special as well. And then there came a point so that was I trained 1990, 1991. In 1992, I started work. At the end of 94, going into 95, I thought to my brother had come to England on a 2-year working holiday with his then girlfriend, now wife. And I thought to myself, shall I go to England and do the backpacking thing that Australians do, or should I stay in Australia? I said that to my mum. I said, I either stay and buy the land, build your big, beautiful house that you've always wanted, or I go to England and travel. And my mum, she said, do what I never did and go and travel. And plus my brother was here. So that I was only 22. And that kind of gave her a bit of peace of mind, I suppose, that my brother was here as well. So I wouldn't just be on my own. So in 1995, I packed up everything and I got a couple of suitcases and off I came to England. I didn't have a steno machine, I don't think. No, I didn't have a steno machine. So I came to England. I'd written to a couple of companies. I did have an interview and I had an exam. So I did have more than one interview. So I started working for one company. Then I went off and did some traveling as a backpacker around Europe. And then when I came back, I worked for a company called Newgate Reporters, which doesn't exist anymore. But they basically sponsored me because I was a real-time reporter, and for them, they didn't have that many real-time reporters, and it wasn't that much of a big thing at that point yet, I don't think. So I would travel around for them. I would do courts martial for the British Army. I would go to places like Cyprus. That was pretty special. I would go to Belfast in Northern Ireland, Germany. So the travel aspect for me of this job sort of started from the get-go, even going back to Adelaide for traveling around the state of South Australia. So it started from the very beginning for me, I suppose. So then with Newgate, I came over on a 2-year working holiday visa. So after that had expired, I had to basically get sponsored. So the sponsorship was for 12 months, and each year for 4 years, we had to advertise the position in 2 of the national newspapers, I think, to show to the Home Office, the authorities, that we had to show them how many people had responded to the advert for a real-time stenographer. And basically there was no responses. So that put me in good stead to show that I wasn't taking a British national's job. So that happened every year for 4 years. And after that, I stayed working for them for quite a while and still traveling around doing courts martial. And then once that all ended, I then became a freelancer. So I've been a freelancer probably since, my maths is terrible, 2001 maybe, I think. And in the beginning, it was a bit nerve-wracking because it was just so different to anything I'd known, and I was used to being told what to do instead of making my own decisions. Nowadays, I wouldn't have any other way. You can decide how much you want to work or how little you want to work. So ever since then, I've been a freelancer. I've been real-time. I do real-time nearly every day, and I travel everywhere. But before I get on to the travel, let's talk about certifications. In Australia, there aren't certifications. You can sit what I would call extracurricular exams to get a speed certificate. And our pay structure, I think I'm right if I remember this rightly. I hope I'm not misremembering it. The faster we could go, the more we got paid. And I think that happens in other countries, other states maybe. So if you could pass a certain speed and you had that certificate, then your pay grade would go up. And I remember once that, I'll probably get onto that later actually. Once I sat an exam and my dear grandfather had not long passed away. And they'd put his funeral back on, it was on a Saturday, and they moved the time of the funeral because I had this particular exam to do that you had to pay to sit the exam in order to get this certificate. Anyway, I go into this exam and I was as ready as I ever would have been given the circumstances. But the piece that was read out, I think it was 210 words a minute. The piece that was read out was about a grandfather and his grandson. So as soon as the word grandfather was said, that was it for me. There was no passing that exam, but never mind. It was all good. It wasn't the end of the world. So that's, like I say, that's not an official certification. That was more to get a speed certificate to show that you were capable of that speed. And then I think you could do the speed test every other year. Anyway, so then let's talk about the UK with certifications. The certifications that the NCRA has, or also not even just the NCRA, the state associations as well. That there's nothing quite like that outside of the US. When I first moved to England, we did have this little card that it was laminated, and it said that you are an accredited court reporter in the Supreme Court of England and Wales, I think it said. I'd have to check that. And sometimes you would have to show that card because the Lord Chancellor's Department, or maybe they were the ones that took it away. I'm not sure. But we did used to have a card that showed that we were accredited. That's what we call it. It's like certification, but we call it accredited. Then that was done away with. So it was certification as such, like in the US, is not really a thing. However, having said that, we have an organisation here called the British Institute of Verbatim Reporters. It's a bit of a mouthful, and we call it BIVR. Some people like to joke and call it Beaver, but it's not. It's BIVR, just because it's such a long name. So BIVR it's been around for many, many years. I think 1865. I always get the year wrong. I think it's 1865. It's been around in various guises, different names. So within BIVR, to become a member of the Institute in the UK, you have to sit an exam, and that's a speed exam of, I'm going to say it's 180 to 200. Could be 180, or is it 200? I'd have to look it up. But we have different exams. We have the membership exam, and then we also have a QRR exam, which is a qualified real-time reporter exam. So that is in varying speeds. You nominate your speed. So if you wanted to do the QRR 1, it ranges from, it's a 5-minute literary piece, and it ranges from 160, I think 160 to 180. So the first minute at 160, the second at 170, the third at 180. And then the fourth minute goes back down to 170 and the fifth to 160. And then there's the QRR2, which is higher again. And I think we go up to QRR4. I don't think we've started a QRR5 yet. But yeah, so people can get those accreditations, and that gives stenographers, the ability to put the letters MBIVR after their name, which is the member of BIVR, and QRR, which is the qualified real-time reporter. Now, it's not mandatory here to have licensure like there is in the States. But I think because it's just, there's nothing quite like this profession than it is in the States, if that makes sense. We have in England probably now maybe 130-ish stenographers, whereas in America you have thousands upon thousands upon thousands. Even though there's a shortage, there's still thousands and thousands and thousands in America compared to here. And Australia, even less than the UK. And then you've got there's some in Asia as well. So the certifications, in the UK, we went into lockdown in March for 3 months, and it was for this pandemic, obviously. And it was something that affected and still affects everybody. We had a daily briefing every afternoon by our Prime Minister on the television. That was, I think it was 5 o'clock every day, could have been 4. And so it got to a point where I just thought, I need to keep practicing. I need to focus on something. So I would sit and I would do the daily briefing on my machine. And I would sit there and I would do it. It was good for dictionary building, for the terminology that we all know now, like pandemic and COVID and corona. But it got to a point where it was actually beginning to get to me, because I was doing it every day, and it was just beginning to get depressing. So I thought to myself, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to focus on trying to get my NCRA certifications, because I was already an international participating member. So I thought, why not? I'm practicing. I may as well try to get it. I've been a stenographer for so many years. I may as well. So that's what I did. I got my RPR in May, I think. March? No, not March, May. And then in the next set of testing, the next block of testing, I then did the CRR, the Certified Real-Time Reporter. Out of everything, the thing I found the hardest was the written knowledge questions. Just pure, I mean, I've got the purple books, I've got the NCRA guide, the study guide, this big, thick book that's like an encyclopedia. But there's so much information in there. But I will say, though, the work, what would you call them? What do you call them? The work. Well, it's not a workbook at the back, but it's kind of like a workbook, and the answers are there and everything. But that really helps you. That helped me a lot. I did those. I probably did all of them. But I walked out of that written knowledge test, and it was the only time I've been in London actually since probably March, was to go into London to do this written knowledge test, because it was before it went online. And I walked out of that exam. I took the whole time that was allowed, and I thought I'd be done quite quickly, but oh, no. I walked out of there, and I was walking towards the guy in reception, and I had my head down. I was giving a thumbs down, going, this just isn't good. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to see you another day, mister. And he looked at me and he said, you're Leah, right? I said, yes. He went, here's your sheet. You know, they give you the sheet at the end. And even though he had a mask on, you could see that he was smiling because of his eyes. And it was a pass. And I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. And then finally, when I got I don't know how many I got correct, but I thought I must have just scraped in by the skin of my teeth. But yeah, so I was pretty pleased about that one. But then let's talk about the CRR. So I write real time every single day. I've been doing it for years. I've written to big screen. I've done X amount of hookups. I get nervous on those jobs on the first day, but nothing. I thought I wasn't cocky for the exam. I practiced and practiced and practiced, but there's something about that exam that you sit there, you get your good night's sleep the night before. And I was as fresh as a daisy. And I woke up, I had my cup of tea, I had my Vegemite toast. I did some more practicing, waiting for the proctor to come on. I found the whole process very simple, very, very simple, like the platforms and stuff. But when it came to the CRR and I'm sitting there and I had to press play or start, whatever it is, when they say you're able to take your test. I was like, oh my gosh. And you're recorded, but you kind of forget. And I just had to keep taking these deep breaths because it was like, oh my gosh, I'm just about to do a real-time exam. Now I've done real-time exams in the past, but this, I can say my hand on my heart, this was the only exam I've ever felt nervous in. And I'm quite lucky in that respect because it's only been one. But I don't know why, but I was so nervous. And I don't know, I just thought focus, breathe and focus, breathe and focus. Because I remember in court reporting school, we had one girl, she actually fainted mid-piece. We had this Canadian teacher who would love to read medical pieces about spondylolisthesis and spondylitis and spondy this and spondy that. This one girl, she just fainted over and fell onto her machine. And we were all looking after her, but the teacher she just kept reading. So what had happened, she forgot to breathe because she was so nervous. So we all sat that exam again. But yes, so the CRR, I was just like, I was not breathing heavily. I was just taking deep breaths. I was talking to myself. And I'm sure if whoever at the NCRA, if they ever want to watch that, it'll probably be quite funny because I'm talking to myself, going, breathe, Leah, press play when you're ready. So my advice to anybody doing not just that exam, but any of the exams, make sure you get a good night's sleep the night before. When you wake up in the morning, do your daily routine that you would do in the morning. And I would suggest picking your best time of day. So for me, because I'm in a totally different time zone, I tended to do my exams, the 3 for the RPR and then the CRR. I tended to do them around 11 a.m. I think maybe for one I had to do at 12:30 or something. Just choose your time. I'm a morning person, so I sort of would get up and I would do some practicing and I would actually practice a lot higher than I was going to be examined on, which I think is the way to do it. Well, for me, it was anyway. But yeah, just do your normal routine, just keep calm and just be in a quiet room. And then when you're doing your exam, just don't rush to press that play button or start button, whatever it was. Just take your time, talk to yourself. Who cares if you're recorded? You've paid to sit this exam. You've got to that point that you are capable to sit that exam. Just take your time. There's no time limit on pressing that button to press play. And then you'll hear the words, ready, begin, and off you go. And hopefully get a good result at the end. So I actually came home yesterday from Africa and my CRR certificate is sitting there. I haven't opened it yet because it's just sitting there. I'm going to take a photo when I open it. But so that was quite nice to come home to. So yeah, the certifications, they go a long way, I think, when it comes to your own. Well, it's different for us, obviously, because it's not a necessity for us. But for me, I do the majority of my work is American depositions, traveling around Europe and the Middle East. So really and truly, lockdown kind of helped me to get those, because it does, sometimes it's a rare thing, but sometimes there are queries and inquiries here for someone who's got US certifications. So it can help. It's a rarity, probably happens twice a year, 3 times a year, but it's a rarity. But it also helps because that's what most of my work is. It does help a little bit to have those letters after your name to show that you've done that. Though it's, like I say, it's not a necessity for us here. So let's talk about the travel. The first thing to that should be said is when you travel for international work, you need to bear in mind that it's not a holiday. You're going away, you're going somewhere to work, and that's the priority. Work is the priority. It's not the sightseeing, it's not the social aspect, it's the work. And the work is tough. The work is hard. The American depositions that we do in Europe, where I travel around for, they're high end. They're pharma patents, they're telecoms, and there's multiple attorneys and parties. So it's big stuff, and it's sometimes you're tired. Well, a lot of the time you're tired at the end of the day. You don't want to go out sightseeing and stuff, and you rarely have time. Quite often it's my friend Jade King, I think many people will know as well. She calls it FIFO, fly in, fly out. And that's what it is a lot of the time. You really, and this is obviously pre-COVID, so you really are, you're flying in and you're flying out just as quickly. But sometimes you're lucky enough to like span a weekend of it for a job, or sometimes what I'll do, I might fly in the day before. When I fly in, say I'm going to, oh goodness, I don't know, say I'm going to Belgium. I remember when I flew, I was working in Antwerp, one of the diamond capitals of the world, and I thought to myself, oh, I might catch an earlier flight on the day that I was leaving, and that gave me an opportunity to go to a diamond factory. So, because for me personally, when I finished a job, when I finished a week of depositions or whatever it is, I just want to get home and get cracking on the transcripts. But on the lead up to the job, you're more sort of, for me, that's when I would want to do my sightseeing, not at the end, if that makes sense, because it's all work. So let me think, what was I going to say? Okay, yes, so places I've traveled. I won't list all the countries because I probably would leave some out. But the highlights, they're all a highlight, really. I'm one of those crazy people who every job's my favorite job. Oh, I've been here, that's my favorite job. Everywhere's my favorite job. So for example, my last, other than this job I've just got back from yesterday, which I'll talk about in a minute, the last travel job before that one was back when Italy actually only had 2 cases of coronavirus. So I'd gone, last year I did 2 weeks in Tuscany of depositions. And it was just beautiful. It was beautiful. And because it was 2 weeks, I had the weekends. I had the first weekend, I had to leave on the Saturday, I think, and then got to the place in the middle of nowhere on the Sunday afternoon, and then started work on the Monday. So did 5 days of real-time depositions, taking all the iPads, and yeah, it sounds glamorous, but it's not when you've got to schlep those iPads around here, there, and everywhere. They're quite heavy when you've got them all together. So yes, 5 days of depositions. Then we had obviously the Saturday and the Sunday off. So that was great because I could go travel. I could go and do day trips to San Gimignano I went to, and I went into Siena as well. So it was just stunning. And every time I do something, I just think I'm blessed, I'm lucky, I'm thankful. And I don't do it for the money like all those people back at court reporting school. So yes, going back to the beginning of the pandemic. So there was another week of depositions in the same case, still in Tuscany, but in a different part of Tuscany. And it was actually even more remote. And when I say remote, I mean, what's the word? remote, like distant from everything. And it was held in the first night spent in Florence, because we had to get to this tiny little place. So we've turned up there, and the go to the hotel. They said, oh, we'll drop your bags off, and then we'll take you across the road so you can see where the job will be tomorrow. We go in, we're shown into this wine shop. It was like a wine tasting shop. It had a proper, beautiful, big, this wine tasting machine that had all these little, I don't know, I'd never seen one before, so it was quite fascinating. And then we've walked through this shop, and now we're going down the most uneven stairs you can imagine, carrying the videographer and I. She's carrying her camera equipment. I'm carrying the iPads and 2 machines and 2 laptops. And these stairs are just, and I hate going downstairs. I don't mind going upstairs. But they were uneven, the stairs, and they were like from the 12th century. Turns out when we got down there, they switched the lights on. We were in the wine cellar of a 12th century, it was a 12th century wine cellar. It was freezing cold as well. But that wasn't the lowest floor. There was still 2 floors even below us from where we were sitting. So we were in there for, we did a week. We were there a week. And the lighting in there that proved problematic. So we had to get some desk lamps and stuff. I think I put one of them on my social media of the tables with the inside the, I lost my train of thought, inside the wine cellar. But what was lovely about that job was it was a dear couple, a dear couple who ran the wine shop. And he actually, I have this photo, I've never posted it, and it reminds me, I must make a note of it. There was a photo of Pietro. He was the guy, the the owner, and his wife, and I've forgotten her name. Anyway, there was a photo on the wall of, it was like a portrait, a sketch of Pietro in his younger days. And I tell you what, it's Mark Kisslingbury over and over and over. I took a photo of it, and I've used a collage app, and I've put it next to Mark Kisslingbury, and they actually look like they could be related. So I might post that at some point. So that was my last travel job before this other one. But it's all over Europe. I can go, like the first job of the year I went to Dubai. That was my first time in Dubai. Not my first time in the Middle East, but first time in Dubai. And that was pretty spectacular as well. And again, for that, it's because I'd not been there before. I think I got there, the videographer and I think we got there a day early. No, I think it was 2 days early because of the flight times of when they land, because they can land at crazy hours in Dubai. So we were able to do some sightseeing and go to the famous Dubai Mall and see the fountain and all that sort of thing. So you will sometimes get downtime, but don't bank on it, because if you're doing international travel, you're inevitably going to have some time zone issues. You're going to have climate issues. You're also going to have, let's call it food issues if the food doesn't agree with you, for example. So there's lots of different issues. So basically, I would suggest if you're going to travel internationally for work, focus on the work first, and everything and anything else that comes after is a bonus. And it's a bonus you'll never forget. It's a bonus you'll treasure if it does happen. And it is pretty amazing. But I will say it's not glamorous. It's far from glamorous. You can be spending hours and hours at the airport. That's just unnecessary, but it's necessary for what you're about to do. So Yes, the travel is, well, for me, and I know some other reporters here as well, who do travel a lot. COVID it's been a big issue for us when it comes to travel. So, I mean, when I was doing my RPR and CRR, I had 14 weeks there where I didn't even have a dicky bird of an inquiry for work. It was just non-existent. So that doesn't help one's mindset either. So that's why I tried to focus on something positive. And then I guess you could say I came out of lockdown different than I went in, because I became NCRA certified. So let's talk about my other job that I've just got back from. So I've just got back from Africa, Arusha, which is in Tanzania. So it's East Africa. And I was doing a war crimes trial for the United Nations. Now, that's something I've got 3 steno goals. I tend not to say them all until they're done. But this was one of them. And I got this from last year at the NCRA convention in Denver. I was actually privileged. I would call it privileged. I was honored. I was delighted to be on a panel for international reporters. And it was called, I think it was called Flying Fingers, which I quite like, because I sometimes use that in my hashtags on social media, fast flying fingers or something silly. So on the panel, there was Jason Meadows. I think I've pronounced that right. Hi, Jason, if you're listening. There was Heidi Thomas. Hi, Heidi, if you're listening. There was Stacey Donison. Hi, Stacey. You knew I was going to say that one. And then me. It was a fantastic panel. And the stories we all had, it was a great experience. And I wish we could do another one, because the 4 of us just had such hilarious stories. And there was the 3 ladies and then Jason. And Jason just takes everything in his hand luggage on the plane. Anyway, that's a topic for another day. So with that, with Stacey Donison, she and I were Facebook friends a little bit before the convention, maybe a year or so, maybe a bit longer. Anyway, we met in Denver, obviously. We had a few drinks, we got to know each other. And then she'd mentioned about this, she's got a contract for the UN. And she mentioned about the Arusha trial, the United Nations. So what it is, it's basically an umbrella organization for 2 of the criminal tribunals for the genocide that happened in the former Yugoslavia, as well as Rwanda. So she said to me 3 weeks before I was due to leave, she said, "Oh, would you be interested in going to Arusha?" And I looked at my diary, which, because of COVID, was looking pretty sparse, I must say. I had a few arbitrations in, some of them cancelled, a couple of them I could give away to other reporters. But there was one that I had that was towards the beginning of December. But so 3 weeks before I left was mid-September. I left on the 7th of October, and I've just got back yesterday. So I obviously had to go earlier because of COVID, and to get into the UN compound, you needed to have a negative COVID test. So within 3 weeks, I don't know how we did it. Within 3 weeks, I got my vaccinations. I got this, I got that. I got everything done, and off I go. And I remember when Stacey asked me, and I had a little tear, because it's been one of my steno goals all my life, really, to work for the UN. And I tell you, there's plenty of reporters out there who have worked for the UN. There's a lot, because of these war crimes trials they just go on and on. because it's always something that's happening, unfortunately, in the world. So I was there for 53 days, I think. And last night was the first night I've spent in my own bed. So that was quite a good night's sleep. But Africa, it was just amazing. And obviously there was a lot of downtime. There was weekends and there was a general election there. So there was they had a public holiday or two as well. So there was lots of time to do things. So I got to do safaris. I got to go see the Maasai in their local villages. I got to do a lot of stuff, and I got to meet some amazing people. So this job can take you anywhere in the world. It's not just the English-speaking world. It's not just the West. It can be anywhere, absolutely anywhere. So I'll be going back for that because we've only just done the prosecution case, so we have to do the defense case yet. So I'll be going back for that. But I just fell in love with Africa. I have been before, but yes, like I say, everywhere I go, it becomes my favorite place. But that's just, I'm a bit fickle like that, but I love everything. I love every place I go, every job I do. Obviously, you have bad days. Don't get me wrong. I must be sounding like I have every day is a great day. No. I have bad days. Most of my bad days happen in arbitrations, actually, when I travel for them. But yeah, it's just, you got to take it on the chin. For every good day you have, you're going to have a bad day. Well, the good days outweigh the bad. So I guess, as the title of this podcast is called Confessions of a Stenographer, I probably should actually confess to something or some things that the world of steno doesn't know about me. Two things I can think of off the top of my head, maybe a few people might know. One of them is I used to play the violin. I quite enjoyed playing the violin, but nowadays I look at a sheet of music and I'm just like, how the heck did I even read that music? But then there's a train of thought as well that says a lot of stenography, I'm sure someone did a study once, but I can never lay my hands on it because I might have just made that up. But someone did a study, I'm sure, that said the majority of stenographers at some point most of us have played an instrument at some point in our life, whether that's true or not. But it kind of makes sense because to learn an instrument and to read a sheet of music, you're learning another language, but you're also learning how to be dedicated to something and practice and practice and practice and practice. So that puts you in good stead to become a stenographer, if you ask me. Okay, the other thing that a lot of people don't know about me is that I'm a bit of a weirdo when it comes to volcanoes. I love a volcano. So in Africa, where I just was, there was a lot of volcanoes. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know Kilimanjaro is actually a volcano. So I'll be seeing that when I go back next year. So volcanoes is a big, big thing. And because Santorini is a volcano, it adds to its beauty for me because it's my favorite place on earth. I've never worked there, and I highly doubt I will ever work there because they probably won't ever need a stenographer because it's all so peaceful. Let me think. Anything else that people don't know about me? Probably not. Oh, I know one thing. My great 5 great-grandfathers removed, let's say, he was instrumental in building the first telegraph line in Australia. And we actually have in our family original letters between, he was a student of Samuel Morse, the Morse code man. And we have original letters in our family between him and Mr. Morse because he wanted to get the help of Mr. Morse in order to set up this telegraph line. And to this day, my mum says that because stenography is kind of like a code, she's a firm believer that code is in the blood of the Willesdorfs. Well, it's actually my mum's side, not my dad's side. And he and his wife used to sit at this big long dining table with the children when they were eating their dinner, and they would do Morse code on the table so that the children didn't know what they were saying. So that's kind of cute. So with that, I think that's probably about it. And it's probably time to wrap up because I've waffled on and on and on. I hope no one was trying to take that down on their machines, because I have a very bad tendency of false starts in my sentences and beginning with so. So I just want to see. Leah. Anyway, I would like to thank everybody for tuning into this Steno podcast of Confessions of a Stenographer. The podcast is designed to add value to our profession, and I hope that I just gave you a little bit of inspiration, even if just a little smidgen. So on that note, I'm going to wish you all a wonderful Christmas, because it's now the 1st of December and it's time to open your advent calendars and open your hearts, because it's Christmas. Okay, thank you. Bye.